Hi, welcome back. Let's pick up where we left off last week, talking about anthropology's central research method, participant observation. Last week, we started discussing these research advantages of participant observation. We said participant observation expands the parameters of experience, space, and time. Actually, can you keep it open? Because I think it locks. I think it locks in this room. Oh, it is open. Participant observation expands the parameters of experience, space, and time in which human activity is intelligible. Today, we will talk about two more research advantages. Participant observation positions us to understand emic perspectives. These are the perspectives of the people under study. And participant observation accurate information from people within that community. So that's number one. Number two in our lecture today. Then third, we will look at a case study that demonstrates all of the research advantages we've been discussing. This is Philip Bourgeau's work on needle sharing among drug users in San Francisco. And I think we should get through that today. Okay, number one, emic perspectives. I'll start by asking you a simple question, which is, what does published anthropological research look like? So psychologists usually publish findings from experimental studies. Sociologists publish maybe results of a large survey. What do anthropologists publish? Anthropologists publish ethnographies. Please say it with me twice. Ethnography. 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 Great. This is a Minsu Zhi. Ethnographies are anthropology's primary research output. What is it? This is the definition we'll use in this class. Ethnographies seek to produce detailed and situated accounts of specific cultures in a manner that reflects the perspective of those whose culture is under discussion. An ethnography is a descriptive account. It's a description of a cultural group. It tries to capture the details and context of cultural life in that group. And by context, I mean how everything relates to everything else. How the economy connects to the political system and the religious beliefs and the family structure and so on. And very importantly, it attempts to reflect the perspective of those whose culture is under discussion. An ethnography attempts to help us, the readers, see things from the perspective of the people under study, the local people's perspective. We have a term for this in anthropology. We call this the emic perspective. Please, everyone, say this with me twice. Emic.
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 Thank you. The emic perspective is the perspective of the people we are studying, including how they perceive, categorize, explain the world. And importantly, when we try to capture the emic perspective, we try to use and understand the words and concepts that they use. Okay? For example, last week we discussed Tanya Lerman's work on Wiccan witchcraft. This is a Weika Wushu. Wiccan witchcraft communities in England. This book, Persuasions of the Witch's Craft, this is an ethnography. It tells us, the reader, how Weika is meaningful from their perspective. For example, the book explores this Wiccan idea of the Force. Okay, the Force. The witches talk about the Force as the source of their power, their superpower. You know, what is this force? How does it work? You know, what does it feel like? This book gives us their perspective. But that's not all the book does. This ethnography, all ethnographies, it's not just a cultural introduction to a group of people, it also addresses a bigger research question. In this case, remember, Lerman is interested in this topic of irrational thought, and she wants to know, how can people in her own culture believe this, right? How can they believe this stuff? And she's not just curious. This question also connects to theories and social issues that deserve our consideration. So how can people believe in this stuff? Well, Lerman has her own perspective on what's going on here. She's participating in these activities. She's trying to understand their perspective. But she also has her own separate perspective about what is going on here. She's trained in cognitive psychology, and she wants to use cognitive psychological theories to explain their interest in witchcraft and why they think they have superpowers. Now, we call her perspective as an outsider. She's an outsider to this group. We call her perspective the Edic perspective. Everyone say it with me twice. Edic.
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 Thank you. The Edic perspective, that is the outsider's perspective. For example, an anthropologist's theories, concepts, ideas about what is important and worth analyzing, those are all Edic perspectives. Okay? Those represent Edic perspectives on this topic. So emic, Edic, you know, who cares? Why is it useful, helpful to make this distinction? Well, it is a very important distinction in anthropology. Here's a quote from a handbook of ethnographic methods. It says, an ethnographic approach implies drawing on both Edic and emic forms of analysis. Above all, it implies keeping them distinct. One of the clearest signs of a flawed or incomplete ethnographic study is confusion regarding which claims are the researcher's Edic conclusions and which are the emic understandings of the informants themselves. All right, why is this important? Why do we need to keep these things separate? Let's look at a very practical reason, which is this. If you want to explain a cultural phenomenon, first you need to know what it is you are trying to explain. An emic account is like a microscope, showing you all the small details of how the phenomenon is lived and experienced by the people being studied. And you need to keep the emic account distinct, separate from the Edic account, because our Edic perspectives control our perception of what we're studying. You all have theories that you like. It's a Marxist theory or some sort of cognitive behavioral psychology theory, and that theory influences how you see whatever it is you're studying. It shows you what to look for. It shows you what's important. It says, look here, look there. If you look here, you might find this. It controls your perception of what you're studying, which is, that's usually helpful, but it can also prevent us from seeing the true form or the fullness of the phenomenon we're trying to explain. Remember the kids who play video games. As psychologists, we might think we know what's going on here. We might say, yes, this is activating the reward centers in the brain. And that might be true. But it's just a small part of it, right? If we can't see this from the player's perspective, we're sort of going to miss the bigger dynamic here. The witches. As psychologists, we might think we know what's going on here. We might say, yes, this is a coping mechanism. Like a coping mechanism. It's something that gives them a sense of control over their lives and their environment. That's our Edic perspective on this. But again, even if that's correct, that's just a very small part of it. Now, as scientists, we always, reduce the big, complex reality to sort of some tiny bit of it that can be captured by our Edic perspectives, right? And that's fine. That's good. That's how science works. You don't explain everything. You explain a little part. That's fine. What's not fine, what's not okay, is believing that our Edic perspective does capture the full reality of what is going on. And when you're studying human beings, their beliefs, their desires, it's very easy to do this. It's very easy to believe that your Edic perspective captures their entire emic perspective. You can read this later. You can read this later. I'll tell you what's going on here. This is an example from shaman studying these traditional pottery techniques, these traditional Tao Chi techniques. And you can read this later, but he's describing a woman who works here and how she experiences her work. And he describes her as being completely absorbed in this work, completely focused in this work. He says she becomes one with this pottery. She becomes one with this Tao Chi. That's how sort of focused and absorbed she is in what she's doing. I mean, that's a very romantic interpretation, right? But it's not clear if that's an emic perspective or an Edic perspective. I mean, it's not clear if that's how she really feels. Is that how she feels? I mean, if so, as anthropologists, we need proof. I need proof. You can't just tell me that's how she feels, that's how she experiences this. I need proof in the form of quotes, some sort of quote from her, or maybe other behaviors that you've observed. So, I mean, is that her perspective, or is this your perspective? Like, this is what you think is going on here, and you sort of push that interpretation on to her. It's very easy to make this mistake. I mean, he's new to this, and this all looks very special and wonderful to him. Oh, these people sitting in these workshops with ancient Chinese culture, using their hands. He must imagine this is a wonderful life. I mean, but he says this woman has been doing the same thing for like 40 years. I mean, whose interpretation is this? Whose perspective is this? Is it theirs, or has he sort of imposed his own perspective on them? We've sort of lost the emic perspective here. It's not clear how they view their work. And this negatively impacts our ability to explain what's going on because, quite simply, we don't know what's going on. We don't know how they feel about their work. Failing to keep emic and Edic perspectives separate, it can have some very negative consequences. And let's look at an example from a study of human trafficking, sex trafficking in Peru, the country of Peru. Sex trafficking, that's when you coerce, that's when you 胁迫 someone into becoming a sex worker. Either you physically sort of take them and force them to do this work, or you trick them into it somehow, and then once you have them, you don't let them leave. Now, we've all seen examples of sex trafficking in movies. We've all seen these movies like Taken, where a girl is just walking down the street and someone sort of jumps out of a car and grabs them, right, and pulls them into the car, and the car drives off very fast and forces them to work as a sex worker. Here's an example from this movie. I'll turn my volume up. It's only about a minute long. I cut it all out. Here we go. Right. People, breaking into your house.
The cousins are back?
So I mean, this is the dominant image we have of this. If you say sex trafficking, we think of something like this. A young, pretty woman just walking along, living her life, and someone jumps out and grabs her, bangjata. So it's the same in Peru. It's the same in Peru. Now, sex trafficking is a problem in some of these towns over here on the border with Brazil. This is Peru's Amazonian region. It's not a problem here. This is the capital of Peru. This is Lima. Lima is a nice place. People there have money and power. Lima is where the government decision makers are. The problem is not in Lima. It's over there on the border towns with Brazil. Specifically, the problem is you have these mining towns. You have these mining towns. These are new towns that just sprang up next to new mines here on the border. And men come from all over the area to work in these mines. But this is very difficult work, this is dangerous work, and after work they want to relax. They want to have a drink, talk to some women, maybe more. So they go to these mining towns, and there you have lots and lots of these brothels, lots of these GUN. So miners come here to drink, meet women, sometimes more. All right, so we have this problem over there. Now in Lima, the government knows there's a problem over there. They know there's a lot of sex trafficking there, and they know where the women are coming from. They know the women are coming from the southern part of Chile. This is the poorest part of Chile. These areas are very poor. The sex workers here, they're coming from there. All right, so they know this is happening, and they think the problem looks like this. Okay, they think the problem looks like this. Someone just comes and grabs these women and runs away with them, and they think this is terrible. Okay, we have to stop this. And they create a plan of action. This is what they do. They say, first of all, we're going to raise awareness. Let's put these posters everywhere in southern Peru and say, look out, be careful, women, you could be kidnapped. Okay? Always watch your surroundings. They put these posters everywhere so you can see in the poster, there's a woman and, there's like a hand around her mouth, someone sort of grabbing her, and you can't see it, but in the back, there's a woman and she's chained. She's chained to the wall, right? So she can't leave, right? Sorry, let's create awareness. Women, be careful. We're going to do that, and we're going to send police into these brothels, into these GUN, to rescue these women, save these women, all right? We're going to go in the brothels and bring all the women out. And then, third, once we save them, we're going to help them. So we can prevent this from happening again. We're going to take them to these care centers, these recovery centers. Give them a place to stay, explain what has happened to them, okay? They don't even know that they are like a shokai, like a shokaiju. They don't even know they're a victim. We'll educate them and tell them what has happened to you is wrong, but it's okay. You can stay here for a few months. We'll give you food, place to stay, and we'll teach you how to take care of yourself. We'll teach you some job skills so that you can get a real job. Right? You can get a real job once you leave here. Okay, that sounds good. That sounds great, but it doesn't work at all. Okay, when the police go into the brothel, into the GUN, the girls don't want to leave. They sort of fight the police very angrily, and when the women get to these centers, these shelters, they don't want to be there. They try to escape and go back to the GUN, back to the brothel. And what's happening here is that the government doesn't really understand the nature of the problem. Their edict perspective, it has no connection to the emic reality that these women experience. The problem doesn't look like this. And the women don't see this as a prison. They do see this as a prison. The real problem looks quite different. So what's going on here? I mean, what's really going on here is you have these women in these very, very poor regions of southern Peru. They are approached and asked, you know, hey, would you like to go to Lima and make $900 a month? You're only making $100 a month right now. You know, Lima, yes! I mean, that's like going to Beijing or Shanghai from some small town in the middle of, you know, Hubei province, right? I mean, that's exciting. Of course I want to go to the big city and make more money than I'm making now. So they say, that's fine. We have, you know, jobs for young women. It's a nice job as a waitress or maybe working in a store. And the man who brings this idea to the woman, it's usually someone she knows and trusts, maybe a cousin, you know, or a friend. So they trust them a little bit. So the women say, yeah, okay. They definitely want to leave here. They usually don't tell their parents because they are afraid their parents will say no. And, you know, no parent wants their child to, you know, leave, you know. So they're afraid that they'll, you know, say no and keep them there. So they leave. But they don't go to Lima. They go here to the mining town. Oops, they don't go to Lima. They go here to the mining town. And they don't have a nice job waiting for them as a waitress or in a store. No, they are asked to work in these brothels, in these jiyuan. And initially they'll be upset. They'll say, this isn't Lima. This isn't a job in a store or a restaurant. And the guy will say, no, it's not Lima. But look, this job is easy, and you're still going to make a lot more money than you made in your hometown, okay? Hey, all you have to do, talk to these guys, flirt with them, just get them to buy drinks. Just get them to buy alcohol. You don't need to sleep with them or anything like that. If you want to, you can. If you want to make extra money, you can do that. But all you have to do is talk to these guys, get them to buy drinks. It's easy. And you're still going to make a lot more money than you did in your hometown. Also, I'm going to look out for you. Okay? I'm going to protect you like a brother. I'll make sure no one harms you. If you have any problems, you just come to me. And they stay. They say, okay, I will. Because actually this is a better situation than they were in. They are making a lot more money, okay? And this town, it's not that nice, but it's a lot nicer than this. This is poor, right? I mean, this is really uncomfortable poor. This is a better place. It's kind of a better situation for them, at least from their perspective. And often they do develop a close relationship with this person who, you know, kind of tries to, you know, protect them. They stay. They usually don't tell their parents what's happened because they know that this type of work is a little shameful, you know, a little embarrassing. No one wants to call their parents and say, oh, Mom, yeah, I know I was going to work, you know, in a restaurant, but actually I'm a sex worker, right? So they don't tell them about this. But for many of them, this is a significantly better life than they have back in their hometown. And when you take them to these centers, they try to come back. So it's important to recognize that the job training that they get in these centers, you know, it's not really training for a good job, like being a secretary. It's more like training to be like a cleaning lady. And it's training to do a very hard job for not much money, okay? Well, this is hard work. It's not very enjoyable, and it doesn't really pay much money, okay? This is pretty easy. You have all the freedom in the world. You can kind of do whatever it is you want to do. and you make a lot more money. So for many of them, this is a very easy choice. I don't want to stay in this care center training to be a cleaning lady who makes no money. I want to go back to this life where I have perfect freedom, I can do whatever I want, and actually I make a pretty good, amount of money. So, I mean, does that make this okay? Does that mean that what's going on here is okay because the girls prefer this instead of that? No, definitely not. Of course not. I mean, this is still a big problem. But the problem is not what we thought it was, right? The problem does not look like this. The problem does not look like this, and this solution isn't helping anything, okay? If we want to solve the problem, then we have to know what the problem is. And it's important to understand what the problem, what the situation looks like for those who actually suffer from the problem. At the very least, you should be able to answer this question. From the perspective of the people we're studying, is this an opportunity or is this a prison? And from the perspective of the people we're studying, is this an opportunity or is this a prison? Participant observation, it puts us there, right? So that we can experience life alongside the people we study and hopefully come to understand their perspective. Now, the emic and the edic perspectives, they're not aligned here, they're not connected. And it's important to recognize that this is normal. This is not like an unusual outcome for a public health intervention. This is normal. This is how things usually work. Because edic perspectives are also subject to cultural forces that shape and distort our ability to see what's going on. Consider this. When you look at this situation, at first it might seem like the solution is actually very simple. Okay, the people in Lima, they don't know what's really going on. Why don't they just call someone over in these mining towns and say, hey, what's really going on over there? It seems simple. It's never that simple. It ignores the fact that there are cultural factors that shape and distort how we perceive the issue. In fact, some people, some groups, they want the problem to look like this. They need the problem to look like this. They're very motivated for the problem to look like this. The families of the sex workers, they might want this to be true. Okay, they might want this to be true. They might feel ashamed that their daughters are doing this work. They might want to believe that their daughter was forced into this, right? That's kind of easier to accept than that they willingly chose to do this and wanted to continue doing it even when they had the option to come home or get a real job. The government wants the problem to look like this. This is a situation in which the government gets to be a hero, saving and freeing all these women. That's a much better story than the alternative possibility, which is that these women willingly chose to do this because of government policies that have created terrible poverty in their hometowns. Well, that would mean this is the government's fault, okay? Well, they definitely prefer this other story in which we have mean, terrible men jumping out of cars and grabbing women. Even social workers and psychologists might feel a little more comfortable with this version, because this version is something they can treat with their PhDs, right, and sort of their research methods and their therapy procedures. This is something they can treat. They can apply for government money and create centers, and try to help people, and that will give them, jobs and resources. But there's nothing for them to do if, the problem doesn't look like this. There's nothing for them to do if the women willingly want to do this work. So there are many people and groups that want this to be true. If that seems hard to believe, I mean, let's consider a Chinese example. I mean, in modern China, there are very strong cultural and political pressures to see all problems as economic problems. What's your problem? Gender inequality, violence, whatever it is, there must be some sort of economic solution to that problem. Government wants problems to be economic problems because it has tools to address economic problems. If it's an economic problem, they can do something about that. Maybe they can fix it. For example, how can we empower women in the Chinese countryside? Okay? How can we create sort of gender equality? I mean, if you ask any official this question, I think the response will probably touch on the need to help women make more money, or have some sort of more financial resources, either higher salaries or laws that enable women to, inherit their father's, house, when they die. We assume that if women will earn more money, they will have more power over their lives. And that's probably correct, right? That's probably correct. It's probably also just a very, very small part of the actual problem. I've taken out the slide here because it has so many words and text on it, but I'll summarize this research. When women make higher salaries in the Chinese countryside, do they feel more empowered? Does that make them more empowered? If we look at women who make more money than their husband in the Chinese countryside, do those women feel more empowered? There's some research on this that suggests no. The research suggests that when women make more money than their husbands, now they're the primary earner, but they still have to do all of the housework and childcare responsibility, right? Now they're making all the money, but they still making the food, cleaning the house, and taking care of the baby. Making all the money doesn't free them up from that. So now they basically have two jobs. The person this benefits the most is the husband, okay? Because now the husband doesn't have to make so much money. He's just out playing, mahjong with his friends all day, while the wife is working, twice as hard. So, on paper, from an economic perspective, we could sort of look at women's income in different parts of China and go, oh wow, those women are empowered right there. Look at those women making much more money than their men. That's our edict perspective, right, on empowering women. Does that match the reality of the situation? I mean, not entirely. I think if we ask these women, wow, you make more than your husband, that's amazing. I mean, so you feel really empowered. A lot of them say, no, I don't. Now I have no life whatsoever. I live in this house 24 hours a day. I run my business from this house. Yeah, sorry, most of them have like online stores like in Taobao, and like that's how they make their money. They do that from home. They never leave their home. They never leave their home. If they're not working on their business, on their computer, they're taking care of the child. I mean, is that empowerment? The way they describe their lives, it doesn't sound very, very pleasant. So, why can't we see what's really going on with the sex workers? Why can't we see what's really going on with the rural Chinese businesswomen? Quite simply, there often is no established space for the emic perspectives to be expressed. There's no space for them to speak and be heard and treated seriously. Most academic disciplines, they're not very concerned with emic perspectives, right? If you are an economist and you are studying, crime rates in a city, you might not care too much to talk to the people in the city and see what they think about this. They have their own analytical tools to try to understand this, and they're going to observe this objectively, like from their office, from afar, right? Don't touch. They're not going to sort of put themselves in there. They're going to try to sort of stand back from a distance and observe things objectively and sort of 100% from their edict perspectives, right? This type of research is purely edict driven. I have this theory, I'm going to use this theory to tell me what's going on, right? It's a fully edict driven analysis. But anthropology aims to be a space for emic perspectives, right? Participant observation allows us to explore those emic perspectives, and if we can understand those perspectives, we're in a better position to align our academic perspectives, our eidic perspectives, with how the problem is experienced by the people we are studying. Okay, let's talk about trust. Participant observation can sometimes create trust between the anthropologist and the people being studied. Trust is important because trust can facilitate access to and accurate information regarding the phenomenon of interest. And this is especially important when we are trying to study so-called hard to study populations. For example, populations marked by poverty, people who are doing illegal activities, right? Very hard to study them without trust. What about just company employees? Why don't you go around to all your professors and ask them what they think about, Wenzhou Kane University and their boss, and the dean, and see what they tell you, right? I mean, if they don't trust you, they're not going to be sincere, right? I mean, if they don't like something, they're not going to tell you because they don't trust you, and because that information has the power to harm them, of course, right? It's actually very difficult to figure out what company employees think, right, about the company they work for, because they really don't want to share that information with anyone. Okay, I have two quotes from the author of the case study we will look at in a moment. You can read these later. But he's saying, look, if you're studying people who are doing illegal activities, you will never get any accurate data if they don't trust you. And the way we create trust is we establish long-term relationships in which we become intimately involved with the people we study. All right, so how does participant observation build trust? Usually in one of two ways. First, when we participate in activities that are meaningful to the people we study, we establish mutual interests that give those people a reason to speak with us. Here's an example. This is a famous anthropologist named Evans Pritchard, Joshua Dauscher. He was studying this group called the Nuer, the Nuer, a group in Africa. And the Nuer are passionate about cows. They're passionate about their cattle. All their cattle have names. They name their children after their favorite cows. I mean, they just love cows. Sorry. The Nuer are, of course, a pastoralist, people. Now, when Evans Pritchard first arrives, they won't talk to him. It's like 3 months, and no one will talk to him. Okay? He goes up and tries to, ask them questions. They say, "Get away. We don't want to talk to you." Until he buys some cows. He gets some cows. Now they want to talk to him. Now they come over and say, "Oh, wow, you got some cows. So that looks like a good cow, and that cow, I can tell you now, that cow is a problem. That cow has a bad personality, and it's going to eat all your food." They have a shared interest now. They have something to talk about, right? Just like if you sit on an airplane next to someone and you find they're from the same town, or they like the same video game, now you have something to talk about. Participant observation gives us that. It gives us mutual interest, shared activities we can sort of use to form conversations with people. A second way to establish trust is through shared experiences that create feelings of familiarity and solidarity. This is Thomas Belmonte. It's hard to get a good picture of him because he died very young, but he studied poverty in the Italian city of Naples. And he's studying this, it's like a xiaochu, it's like a resident community in Naples, very, 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 very poor community. And he finds it extremely difficult to get people in the community to trust him. They all think he's some sort of police or some sort of spy from the government, and they won't talk to him. But as he lives there, things happen, right? People get killed or die, and they all come out in the streets and then cry, and he goes down there and tries to talk to people. They have experiences together. And over the course of time, they start to see him as one of them based on these shared experiences, and they start to treat him as one of them. For example, he says, after I had lived for 8 months at Fontana del Rey, that's the name of this Xiaochu. What does he say? Yeah, he was robbed, right? He was robbed, and he's so excited about this because that means that they're treating him like they would treat anyone else in the community. Here also, he says, one evening, I returned to my apartment to find my window broken and my tape recorder had been stolen. He says, oh, this is so great. Never before have I felt like I was such a part of this community. So in both cases, he's very excited that he has been robbed because now he is having the same experiences as they have. And they start to see him as one of the community, and they start to speak with him as one of the community. Once the tape recorder is stolen, everyone comes over and they go, oh, Thomas, someone stole your tape recorder. I bet it was him. I bet it was him. He lost his job. He doesn't have any money. He's desperate for money. But this is what they do with each other, right? Something bad happens to them, and then everyone comes over and they just sort of talk about it and then figure out who to blame, right? So previously, they didn't rob him because they think he's an outsider, but now that he's one of them, they have these shared experiences, and from those they start to build up these relationships. All right, just one last example regarding trust. Let's return to Seth Holmes' study of the illegal migrant laborers. Now, the migrant workers he studied, they make an illegal border crossing about every 2 years. Now, so this is the U.S.-Mexico border, right? This is the U.S.-Mexico border. And you might think that the border crossing is pretty simple, right? Just sort of hop over this fence, you were in Mexico, now you're in the United States. No. First of all, it's a very long trip. The farms, the communities that Seth Holmes studies, they're not here. They're all the way up here. They're almost in Canada. I mean, they're at the very most northern part of America. And the migrant workers, they don't come from here, okay? They come from the most southern part of Mexico. This is the poorest part of Mexico. Northern Mexico, this is a very developed area. There's lots of factories here. These people have money. The migrant workers come from all the way down here, and this is a very dangerous trip. So you have this border, we have this border with Canada. I mean, this is one of the easiest borders in the world. Until very recently, you don't even need like a hujao. You just walk back and forth across the border. It's no big problem. This border is the third deadliest border in the world. 700 migrant workers die each year trying to make this crossing. It's very dangerous for many different reasons, okay? The weather can be very dangerous. The people are dangerous. There's people out there to rob these migrant workers because when they make this trip, they take all their stuff with them, right? They've got money that they need to sort of get an apartment up here. They've got lots of resources on them. People steal from them. Sometimes just kill them. That's easier, right? No one's going to come looking for these people either. No one's going to come looking for them. And there's some deadly animals in the desert. I mean, the desert can be a dangerous space. So this is a long and dangerous trip. And Seth Holmes, he goes with them. He accompanies them. He does this, right? He sleeps out in the desert. He's running away from the people who are trying to steal from him. He gets arrested. He gets arrested by the U.S. Border Patrol, thrown in jail. Now he has a criminal record, okay? He has broken laws, and that is on his record. But the people he studies really trust him, and his willingness to sort of share in the risks and dangers that characterize their lives establishes this trust. Throughout the book, you can see how much these people trust him. But when he meets new migrant workers, they don't trust him. He's a white person. They think, oh, this is a spy or a police or someone from, the government agency is here to examine us. And his migrant worker friends will say, no, he's not police. He's actually a researcher. He's actually a scientist at UC Berkeley. And they don't believe him. They don't believe him until they hear about how much he suffers with them. They say, no. This man works in the fields with us. This man crosses the border with us. This man suffers with us. And that's the point at which he becomes one of them. And I think that's a fair generalization across anthropological research. It's when we suffer, we experience risks and pain with the people that we're studying, that they're sort of willing to accept us as one of their community, right? Suffering with people can create, powerful bonds of trust with those people. You can read this later. So, these examples show that when an anthropologist willing to step into their world, experience life as they do, especially their suffering, especially the risks they have to take, this can create, bonds of trust. From there, we get a deeper investigation of what we're trying to study. Let's go to this case study. Now, I told you this case study would demonstrate all these advantages that we have been discussing, right? Space, time, experience, emic leader. All right, so this is the mid-1990s, San Francisco. And at this time, drug users have very high rates of HIV, mostly due to sharing needles. So these drugs, you gotta do this, right? You have to use the needle. And these drug users, they do the drugs, and then they give it to their friend uses it, and they spread their blood, and this can spread disease. So our phenomenon of interest here is needle sharing. Why do people use dirty needles even though they have clean ones? Okay, that's our research question here. And this is a public health issue, right? We're not investigating this from like a police issue. This is a public health issue. And I give you a little background into a guiding assumption in public health administration. Public health programs, they often use what's called a deficit model of knowledge and prevention. This model assumes that people make unhealthy choices because they lack the knowledge and resources necessary to make healthy choices. If people aren't wearing seatbelts, in their car, if you're thinking about this from a deficit model prevention, you think, okay, maybe they don't know it's dangerous to not wear a seatbelt, or maybe their cars don't have seatbelts. Let's just give them that knowledge. Let's tell them it's dangerous to not wear a seatbelt, and let's create a law that requires all cars to have seatbelts. I mean, this is a very common sense approach to public health, right? And in this case, the public health officials, they discover that sharing drug needles is spreading diseases. And they say, all right, we need to make people aware that this is dangerous, and we need to give them access to clean needles, okay? Let's make the needles available for free at health clinics, all right? You're using drugs? Okay, you can come in and take free, clean needles, no questions. You don't need to use your name or Shenfeng Zheng. No one's going to follow you or call the police, okay? Also, something else, we're going to figure out where people are doing these drugs. We're going to identify these drug houses. We're just going to go over there and put some clean needles and cleaning supplies in those houses. And of course, we're going to let them know it's dangerous. Guys, don't share needles, don't share needles. All right? If you don't have clean ones, we'll give you clean ones, come to us. Now, at first, this seems to be working. At first, this seems to work. At least, people are coming into the clinics to get needles. Okay, drug users coming into the clinics, taking all sorts of needles and leaving. However, the rate of new HIV cases is not going down in the drug use community. It is discovered that even though people have clean needles, they're often not using them. Why? What's going on? Dr. Bourgeot going to find some answers. He, as a medical anthropologist at UCLA, spent many years studying cocaine, cocaine, and heroin, heroin, cocaine and heroin drug communities in San Francisco and New York. He spends a lot of time in these drug houses. They're called crack houses. These are houses where people consume the drugs. So this would be an example of a crack house, a drug house. It's just an abandoned house. No one really lives here full time. People might sleep there, but no one really owns it. They are very dirty on the inside. I mean, the ground is covered in needles. And the people do drugs here. Heroin, cocaine, these drugs have to be, prepared. They have to be prepared. It's not like a cigarette where you can smoke a cigarette anywhere. Just whip, pop it right out and go. These drugs, you have to mix this with this, and then you have to have a fire and stir things up. They have to be prepared. So you need a safe space. It's not something you want to do outside, right? Oh, and I mean, none of them have like a real home. They're all homeless, right? So it's not like they can just go home and do it, in their bathroom or something like that. They do drugs in these drug houses. And he spends a lot of time in these houses, a lot of time. We're just going to look at one specific evening that he discusses in one of his articles. All right? Today we're just going to look at one night of his participant observation fieldwork. This night, it starts in a Burger King parking lot around 5 p.m. He sees a man named Max. This is a heroin user that he knows very well. Max needs $2. He almost has enough money to buy a small amount of heroin, a small hit of heroin. And he needs it now, because he knows that in a few hours he will have withdrawal pains. I always screw this up. This is 戒断疼痛. This is when you stop using the drugs and you feel a lot of pain, right? And heroin withdrawal pains are extremely awful. People die from them. You can die from them. It's very, very serious. So Max is nervous. Max needs to find heroin now. So Dr. Bourgeot, he walks with Max, and soon they find these two drug dealers that they know, Scotty and Butch. And Max says, hey, I'm short $2. I'm missing $2. Can you please give me a small bit of heroin? I will pay you back tomorrow. They say, okay. You can share this heroin with us that we're about to do right now. Max says, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, can you just wait a second so that I can go get my clean needles at my campsite? I mean, he's homeless. He doesn't have a home, but he has this little tent under a bridge. It's right over there. It's 100 meters away. Can you just wait a second? I'm just going to run over. It's right there. I'm just going to run over there and get those needles and come back. It's not far. Well, Scotty and Butch are annoyed by this, okay? Scotty and Butch are annoyed by this. They say, all right, Max, you can go get your needles and, just meet us at the drug house. We're going to go ahead and go to the drug house. Max says, that's okay. That's okay, no problem. I'll come with you. Max is afraid they will start without him, or develop a plan to cheat him, right? So they go back to the drug house. Once they're there, Scotty takes out the drugs and starts to prepare them, starts cooking them, and he picks up a dirty needle off of the ground. And Dr. Bourgeau says, wait, you should clean that first. He says, look, there are cleaning supplies in the house. There are clean needles in the house. It's in a different room. It's like upstairs or something. Let's just go get those cleaning supplies. But no, Scotty, Butch, Max, none of them are willing to let the drugs out of their sight for even 1 second. They're all afraid they will be cheated. Now, some of these people, they're very, very good at quickly switching out a real drug for a fake drug. Some of them are very good. If we're making the drugs, and you turn around just for a second, they just, whoop, they just very quickly replace the real drugs with fake drugs, and you get cheated. They're all worried about this possibility, so no one will stop preparing the drugs to clean the supplies. All right. There are other people in the house. Some ask if they can share the drugs. Can we try that? Can we have some of that? Scotty and Butch say no. And one person, his name Pete, he's drunk, he gets angry and starts hitting the walls with this crowbar, okay, this tool. He's hitting the walls, it's making a lot of noise, there's dirt and trash flying everywhere. This makes Scotty, Butch, and Max very nervous. And Dr. Bourgeau, very nervous. They want to speed up the process, right? They're thinking, waiting, let's go. Max's withdrawal pains are about to start. If this man gets aggressive and knocks this over, sort of destroys the drugs, Max is in big trouble. So they're all sitting there, come on, let's go, hurry up. Now while they're cooking the drugs, while they're making the drugs, Dr. Bourgeau goes into the other room and gets clean needles. He says, you guys aren't gonna clean the needles, I will go and get the clean needles from the other room. He goes into the other room to get the clean needles and brings back 3. He brings back 3 clean needles. Finally, the drugs are ready, the drugs are prepared. Scotty takes one of the clean needles and uses it. Because he wants to hurry, he puts all of the heroin into one needle for them to share, rather than put small amounts in 3 needles. Again, he wants to hurry. He's afraid that Pete will ruin everything. It takes more time to put the drugs in 3 needles. Max initially objects to this. He says, come on, man, you've got clean needles right there. They're right in front of you. Just use 3 needles. Scotty, who has the drugs, gets very angry. He says, hey, I am doing you a favor. I am helping you out. You don't even have enough money to buy these drugs you're about to have withdrawal pains. I'm helping you out. And you think you're too good to share a needle with me? Max is very afraid that maybe Scotty won't let him use the drugs. So he says, sorry, no problem. Go ahead, give me that needle. Max uses the shared needle after all of that. All right. Let's just stop there and think about how what we've seen so far in this one evening sort of expands our awareness of the factors that are contributing to this problem of needle sharing. Space. To understand what happened at the drug house, we need to understand what happened at a second location, a second space, Max's campsite. Why didn't Max has clean needles? Why didn't he bring them? To understand that, we need to understand what happened at this other space, this Burger King parking lot. Time. Max used that dirty needle Why did he use it, even though he had clean needles? So Max is normally very cautious, normally very rational, very careful person. Very organized. I mean, Max went to the health clinic to get the free needles, right? He knows it's dangerous. He doesn't want to take risks. He doesn't want to use dirty needles. And normally he's very cautious. And if you observe Max for a week, almost every day, almost every minute of every day of that week, the Max you observe will be a very careful, cautious, practical man. Until he hits that little window of time when his withdrawal pains are about to start, now he becomes a very different person. Now his decision making is very, very different. He's willing to take risks. He's willing to take huge risks, anything, to avoid the withdrawal pains. So if you're examining Max and you miss that little window in which he becomes a completely different person, you don't understand the situation, right? Most of the time, you would examine Max and you'd be like, hey, no problem. We made them aware that drugs are it's dangerous to share the needles. This guy understands it. He's getting clean needles. The program was a success. You have to observe him long enough that you can see that one little window where he becomes a completely different person. Experience. Dr. Bourgeault draws on his own feelings of fear to identify a factor here. When they're preparing the drugs, and Pete is, banging the walls with that tool, Dr. Bourgeault is scared. Dr. Bourgeault, he has a family he has to go home and support. He can't die doing this research just because he loves anthropology. He has, commitments in his life. He's afraid. And he himself is thinking, come on, quite again. Well, he uses his own experience to identify that factor, fear, that makes them hurry, that makes them want to go as quickly as possible. All right, emic perspectives. We didn't really talk about this, but Dr. Bourgeault's articles talk a lot about drug sharing as a type of social security insurance. These people have nothing. They don't have jobs, they don't have families, they don't have homes. Heroin will just destroy you fast, all right? They don't have money. Often they don't have food, or even clothes. They don't have anything. The greatest resources they have in their lives is just a few friends that they make in these drug houses. Those are their only social networks in the world. They don't have friends at church and work and big families. All they have are the people they meet in these drug houses. And in that context, sharing drugs is a very, very powerful way of creating social bonds with someone else. Maybe like in a war, like a battle, like two men, they're going to die anyway. The whole world's being torn apart. They just share a cigarette back and forth. What does it matter? Our lives suck anyway. And it's nice if we can just share this cigarette and we'll feel better, we'll feel like brothers. According to his research, it really takes away from that bonding if you can't share the same needle. If you need to sort of say, wait, thank you so much for agreeing to share your drugs with me, but who knows what diseases you might have. I need to go ahead and have my own needles. You keep your needles, I'll keep my needles. This destroys the bonding experience. Finally, trust. Obviously. You can all go to America and do a master's degree and study cocaine and heroin communities in San Francisco, no problem, right? You can go to these houses and ask them whatever questions you want to ask them, and they'll tell you whatever you want to know. Of course not. None of us can do this research. None of us can do this research. They don't trust us. They trust him. And this trust was created in large part through participant observation. And this gives us an opportunity to clarify something in our definition of participant observation from last week. You might wonder, is this really participant observation? Dr. Bourgeault doesn't use drugs. he doesn't buy drugs. He's not allowed to purchase drugs. You know, Max needed $2. It would have been illegal for him to give Max those $2. Legally, that would be him buying drugs. He can't do that. He doesn't sell drugs. All right, so you don't use drugs, you don't buy drugs, you don't sell drugs. In what sense is any of this participant observation? Remember, last week we said participant observation is the blah, 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 is a consequential social actor. Dr. Bourgeault is a consequential social actor in this community. He influences what happens in this community. His actions have consequences for them. He helps them. He babysits for their children. He goes to courts and hospitals with them. He helps them apply for jobs and ID cards. His research, what he's doing here, it has consequences for them. And what happens there certainly has consequences for him. It's dangerous for him. And emotionally, it's very difficult for him. He's very close to these people, and they have very hard lives. I mean, his publications feature many examples of human suffering and death. His friends are always dying. I mean, this obviously has a very strong influence on him, has very serious consequences for him. All right. So what came of this work? What good came of this work? So this research was used to design several intervention strategies. I'll give you an example of one. How do we fix this problem? One thing the city did was they recruited volunteers to live in these drug houses, okay? They live in there for like 24 hours a day. They don't use drugs, they're not drug users. And they just make sure that everyone is using clean supplies, okay? They live there, and when someone comes in and starts doing drugs, they come over and say, oh, you're doing some drugs. Okay, look, here's a clean needle, you know, here's some cleaning supplies. I'll help you out. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to leave your drugs. I'll just bring the clean supplies to you. Just make sure anyone who does drugs there is using clean supplies. I mean, this intervention saved thousands of lives. I mean, it was a very successful program. All right, finally, I know some of you are wondering, how is this legal? Like, what is the legality of this research? Or, you want to stop this problem, why don't you just report these people to the police? Why don't you bring the police in, and the police will punish them, and we can have a big punishment, and that will stop the problem. So the answer is, I don't know. I'm not a medical anthropologist, and I don't sort of know how drug use communities work. But I can tell you that any illegal drug use involves a network of participants. You have producers, transporters, dealers, and users. Law enforcement. This is not, Dr. Bourgeault does not work for the police. He works for the public health. Law enforcement, of course you focus here, and you focus here. If you get those people, big punishment, right? Send them to jail forever. I mean, what do you do with these people? Seriously, put them in jail? I mean, you can't fine them. They don't have anything. They don't have any money. You can't oh, you have to pay us $50,000 for using drugs. Well, you can put them in jail. Maybe that would help, but that's very expensive, right? It's very expensive to put people in jail. If someone goes to jail, we all have to pay for that. We all have to feed them every day, give them medical care, hire guards to protect them. There are a lot of these drug users. If we just put them all in jail, oh my gosh, we're going to need lots and lots and lots of jails. What we're going to kill them? I mean that's pretty serious. So it's usually the law enforcement, the police, they focus here, and it's the public health institutions focus here. Try to get them help, but also just try to minimize damage. They say, hey, we don't want you using drugs. We try to help you stop using drugs. We can't help you? You're going to keep using drugs? Fine. Then we want to minimize whatever damage you might do, right? You're going to do these drugs, at least use clean Needles. All right, I think that's it. I'll see you back in our normal room on Friday. And thank you for joining us up here in this dark, hot room. I'll see you on Friday.